Hello and welcome to Communication Connection. I'm Terry Likes. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a program that focuses on the accomplishments of students, faculty, and alumni affiliated with the Department of Communication. And our guest today is one who fits all of those categories, at least at one point in time or another. Carrie McCormick is our guest. She's an instructor in the Department of Communication. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Dr. Likes.
Life has a way of going full circle sometimes, and you graduated from Mississippi State 20 years ago, and you've had a lot of adventures since then. But as we look back, with so many college choices that people have, what first attracted you to Mississippi State?
Well, I hate to admit it, but it wasn't necessarily the academics. My dad graduated from Mississippi State and my mom from the W, and so we grew up being really big Bulldog fans. So coming up to different football games, going to bowl games, we actually even went down to some SEC basketball tournaments when I was a kid that would be in New Orleans, and so I was pretty much brainwashed a Bulldog from birth.
Well, that's great. But it's not your first time teaching here. This is your first semester back, if you will. So I know many people this year have said, welcome back to campus, welcome back to McComas Hall. You've been able to gain a lot of experience since then, but kind of a welcome home for you.
Very much so, and I was so excited to have the opportunity to come back home. So I first started here, it was my very first job out of graduate school from '04 to '07 in the communication department as an instructor as well. So I came straight out of grad school, fresh, newly minted 24-year-old teacher, back with all of my colleagues back in the day.
Well, it must be interesting now, to say the least, that you're back in those McComas hallways and classrooms and working with professors you had in class 20-something years ago.
It is. I laughed. On the first day of classes, I was helping direct freshmen that were lost in McComas because I still knew all the ways around. But it is a little bit different now, you know, with perspective and age. I'm definitely, now I'm closer to my students' parents' age versus my students. But when I first taught here back in '04, all of my old professors were here. So everyone from Dr. Flick, Dr. Goodman, Sid Hill, Marianne Ulmer, Amy Fountain, everyone. And in fact, my old office was actually across from my advisors as an undergrad, so that was an interesting dynamic. So now there are a couple people here, but as you know, we've had new faces and new colleagues in the department, so it's been great. It's been very welcoming.
Well, a chance for you to give back to the next generation, certainly.
Hope so.
And you've gained so much experience along the way. So you went and earned a master's degree from the University of Arizona. And after some time teaching, you earned a law degree. What took you in that direction?
Well, from Arizona or law?
Let's say law.
Law degree. Well, I'd come back from Guatemala and was teaching at Louisiana Tech. And I wasn't really sure if that was what I wanted to do full time. I'd kind of stumbled into teaching as a TA. I had an uncle that was an attorney, and I love to learn. In fact, the joke is, when am I going back for another degree? And I love to read, I love to write, and I thought, well, why not law school? And honestly, there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. I applied in April, took the LSAT in June, accepted in July, sold my house, and started the adventure of law school.
And so did you work with a law firm, excuse me, at one point?
I did. I practiced for 3 years. So right out of law school, I actually clerked for a judge in the Hinds County Circuit Court. So got to see all sorts of civil and criminal cases. And then I went to work for a civil firm there in Jackson, primarily doing medical malpractice defense.
Well, you mentioned Guatemala, so you're teaching, and you mentioned Louisiana Tech. You've also taught at Ole Miss. We won't talk about that. But the international experience, that's something not everyone gets to do. Not
at all, and I would highly recommend it to anyone, whether it is volunteering abroad, whether it is doing a study abroad in college. But I had worked out at a summer camp in Texas for 5 summers, and I had different friends that got pulled down into Guatemala volunteering at this international Christian school. And the whole time I was here teaching at Mississippi State, they were sending me, there were pictures, they were contacting me, say, hey, Carrie, we need you to think about this, pray about this. And so in a leap of faith, I moved down to Quetzaltenango, Guatemala, and taught in the highlands there at an elevation of about 7,500 at a school. I taught high school history, of all things, for a year.
Well, that was a leap of faith, to say the least. I know MSU has a strong study abroad program, and one of your colleagues is taking a group of students in summer 23 to London, but London's a little bit different than Guatemala. Do you talk with students today about taking advantage of study abroad experiences while they're in school? This is a good time in life to do something like that.
Definitely, and I very much prompt them towards it. I think it gives you, especially, I know for me coming from a small town in Mississippi, it opened my eyes to the bigger world out there, the bigger concerns. And I think to go somewhere where you stick out no matter what, if you don't speak the language, I became a minority in the Latin American culture, I think it's eye-opening and it just really helps you expand your horizons.
And it takes you out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
Well, I know that you, with all of this experience that you've gained, you have been able to, and then you enjoy presenting at conferences based on your expertise and your life experiences. And most recently, just to pick one out of the hat, you were able to, via the University of Mississippi, teach a writer's symposium. Is that correct? An interactive workshop. Tell us about that.
Yes, it was the Transition to College Writing for educators all across the state. So we had junior high, high school, community college, senior college. In fact, I even ran into some of my new colleagues that I had met here from the Writing Center in the English department when I was there. But it was working to help educate on different methods of teaching, new pedagogies, and I specifically focused on using culture and dialect and staying true to one's native voice in writing and speaking.
Well, that's interesting, because certainly my background being in the broadcast arena, we are taught to try to maybe talk without an accent, for example. But yeah, I guess you're encouraging people in today's society embrace your background. Very
much so. I think we lose a part of our cultural identity if we try to completely sterilize how we speak. And teaching public speaking quite frequently in the past, it hurts my heart when a student comes up and says, "Miss McCormick, I don't want to speak so country." And I say, y'all, I'm from Copiah County, Mississippi. You can still be successful without losing a part of who you are when you're speaking and writing.
Well, you mentioned teaching public speaking. I know you've taught elements of persuasion and how important that is in society, communication theory, introduction to communication, just to name a few. I know you've got a wide repertoire of teaching abilities, but is there one that's a favorite for you?
Every semester, it's the one I'm currently teaching. Ends up being my favorite. But I think for me, anytime when students can apply that theory and see how it unfurls in real life is what's important to me. So for example, in my persuasion class this semester, their final paper was to do a deep dive into their career and then analyze it through the lens of a theory as well as other persuasive concepts into how they'll use persuasion every day. So I loved having students draw that link between theory and application. And a couple of students wanted to be attorneys, one wanted to be a teacher, different PR professionals, and having them see that theory in real life.
It certainly is one of the, I guess, the more sought after or favorite classes among students. We could open up more sections and they would continue to fill. But that persuasive ability, I think it's something that a lot of people take for granted and they don't really realize it. But when they do the deep dive into the subject matter, they realize, wow, this is not only helpful in the workplace, it's look at its uses in the political arena and so forth.
And scarily, they even see how they can use it in their interpersonal relationships as well.
Yeah, and certainly in the commercial world as too, the things that we buy are often based on the persuasive abilities. So I guess that lends to the next question of communication is such a broad discipline. I will often get questions from parents and their children about what can someone do with a communication degree. I think you're a fine example of that. You can go in so many different directions.
Definitely. I will say my parents had the same question when I chose communication studies as my emphasis area, but I think it's a degree that teaches you how to think and how to write, how to look at things very critically, and also even how to design things when you go to that aspect of our major. So it really does well-round students for multiple types of careers.
Well, as everyone saw in the open of the program, that the different concentrations within the department, and some of them are a little more visible than others. We all know what goes on within theater, for example, or broadcast, journalism, public relations. But communication and media studies may not be one that is as much of a household name, but tell us about the discipline and what it can do for someone.
Well, I think in particular if someone is going on to higher education or if you're going to work in any kind of political realm, I think you're breaking down all of these different theories that we've talked about, from persuasion to family communication to crisis communication, all of these different backgrounds, and you're learning how to enter a situation, how to adapt your communication to best communicate with your audiences, but you're also learning to look at the underlying reasons behind that communication, analyze the motivations behind it.
Well, when you are not teaching or presenting at conferences or doing work-related things, I know you enjoy time with family. And when the weather's right, which is quite often in this part of the country, you enjoy being out on the water too.
I do. So I would live on or in the water. I tell people all the time if I could. My family has a place over in Louisiana on Lake Yucatan and Oxbow Lake, an active Oxbow Lake inside the levee system where I like to spend a lot of time.
So water skiing is a favorite. Are there other water-related activities?
Definitely. So I can wakeboard, but I'm not as fancy on it as a lot of people. These days I don't want to hurt myself. But we go fishing quite a bit, take boat rides. We actually go out. There's a chute that connects our lake out to the actual Mississippi River. So we'll go out, look at the barges, go up to some of the different sandbars, and spend time there.
So, and you're certainly adept at as a slalom or a one-ski person.
I am. So bless my poor dad's heart. He drugged me around a lake all summer, I think, when I was 13 until I was finally able to master the slalom. And now I've been doing it ever since. And the joke in our family is my mom did it until she was 50. So I've got a few more years. I've got to keep getting up on it. Okay.
Well, I guess I'm past my shot at doing that then. So I've always enjoyed skiing, but I never was able to do what you can do, and that's be an adept at slalom skiing. Well, bringing it back full circle then, 20 years removed from the undergraduate experience here on campus. You've gained all of this wonderful experience. What advice do you have for students today? Because your perspective has certainly changed, as it does for all of us.
It does. I would say so many of my students, especially our high-achieving students, come into college with a very specific life plan. And I would tell them it's okay to throw that plan out the window, to step off the path they have for themselves, make a decision that maybe goes against the grain, choose to do something that scares them, whether it's change your job, study abroad, do something to really push yourself. It's okay to not follow the life plan that you had laid out.
And because you've gone to graduate school, and we often have students, what can that do for me? What advice do you have on that regard for those who are considering their options when they're looking past undergraduate and the graduation ceremony?
Well, I think it does give you a little bit more time. It gives you specific knowledge and skills within that particular field. It also is a great way to network. I'm still in touch with quite a few people from my different from law school and from my graduate degree, and it allows you to have those connections and talk to as you're going out into the workforce.
Well, networking and connections very important in today's world. Communication, persuasive ability. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us here on Communication Connection. Great to hear your story. And we thank you for joining us here on Communication Connection. I'm Terry Likes. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.